The first time I saw the thing that killed the survey team, it was the size of a thumbnail on a laptop screen. We were in a briefing room buried somewhere under Norfolk, furniture bolt-mounted to the floor, walls the colour of old bandages. A single monitor on the far wall played helmet footage on a slow loop. The sound was off. I preferred it that way. Again, the colonel at my shoulder tapped the table with one knuckle. The tech in the corner rewound. The image jumped back to the start of the last file. Snow. Headlamps splashing off ice. The view jerked with each step as the man wearing the camera trudged through a tunnel the drillers had cut down into the Antarctic bedrock. Everyone in the shot wore cold-weather gear over armor, an improvised mix of research crew and security. The last group. The ones they never found. "Watch the right side," the colonel murmured. "Pause where you need." I leaned forward. "My name is Captain Jordan King, evolutionary biologist. At least I used to spend my time writing papers about predator-prey arms races. Somewhere along the way, the work attracted uniforms. On screen, the tunnel widened. The team stepped into a cavern where the rock bent inward like frozen waves. Light played over a ring ahead, stone and ice fused as if poured together and then frozen mid-surge, ribs of darker material running around an inner rim. The gateway. The point man lifted a hand. The file did not have audio, but I could see his body language. Hold position. The view shifted as the cameraman looked up, down, checked corners, then forward again toward the ring. The air inside the ring looked wrong. It had a blur, a shimmer, like hot road above asphalt, except here it hung in a perfect circle a little taller than a man. The colonel spoke in a flat tone. "We sent an unmanned probe through first, air-gravity compatible, no immediate toxins, so we pushed personnel. This is the last feed before loss of signal." I already knew that part from the written brief. Seeing it in motion was different. The team moved through in single file. Each man stepped into the circle and vanished mid-stride, like walking behind a wall you could not see. The cameraman went last. A flick, and the world changed. Same perspective, new place. The brightness shifted from harsh headlamp glare to diffuse daylight filtered through a high canopy. The ground was layered with dark soil and broad leaves. Trunks rose around them, thicker than anything that had grown on Earth in a few million years. The air looked heavier, more moisture. Just from the movement of foliage, I could tell there was more wind than the Antarctic cavern had ever seen. My chest tightened, the way it always does when I think of places that have never encountered human beings. A fresh branch on the tree of life, untouched. Then the thing that lived on that branch came into view. It started as movement on the left. The point man turned his head. Leaves rustled. Nothing obvious. The team formed a loose circle, rifles aimed outward. I tapped the table. Slow. The tech dropped the speed. The image crawled. A shadow slid between two trunks. Limbs, but too many joints. A body with the wrong proportions. The team started to shift, dragging their formation into a tighter knot. They had trained for contact. What they had not trained for was prey that learned between encounters. The thing came from above. One moment, the canopy was a mess of overlapping branches. The next, a section of it folded downward. A mass of muscle and bone dropped onto the rear man, the one with the camera. The image spun as they went down. For a few frames, there was only soil and leaf litter close up. Then, the camera ended up on its side, visor cracked, still transmitting. The view settled at an angle where I could see the man pinned under the creature and part of the thing itself. It was big, but not huge. Maybe 2 men in weight. Limbs like a cat crossed with a primate, long and powerful, tipped with claws that hooked inward. It was not the claws that held my attention. Strapped across its shoulders, fed under loops of muscle and skin, were nylon straps. A chest rig, webbing, human kit. The pouches were torn, as if the thing had grown through them instead of putting them on. I leaned closer. The colonel watched me instead of the screen. "Thought that would get your interest." The creature lowered its head to the man's throat. Flesh parted. I saw teeth, irregular rows of them, some shaped like a carnivore's, some flat like a herbivore's, as if it had never decided which diet to commit to. Blood sprayed. The man went still. I forced myself to focus past the obvious violence. Muscles along the animal's flank were layered in ways that did not match any mammal I had studied. Under the skin, I caught glimpses of something that looked disturbingly like human deltoids and triceps, arranged in a pattern familiar from anatomy charts. The angle of its elbow bend, the way it shifted its weight. Someone had taught this thing how to grapple. Except no one had. It had eaten the lesson. I exhaled slowly. It incorporated them. The colonel put both hands on the back of the chair in front of him. Explain that for the slow one in the room. The rig. I nodded toward the straps crossing the thing's back. It is not wearing the harness. It grew around it. Look at the muscle. Those lines are human. The way it pins him. Those grips are very close to how we teach close quarters control. It remodeled itself to use what it devoured. The footage stuttered. The creature dragged the body off screen. The feed broke into static. The colonel thumbed a remote. The screen froze. He turned to me. You just explained in 2 sentences what a whole panel of other experts took an hour to dance around. You brought other biologists in? We tried. Most of them wanted to publish before they finished reading the brief. I kept my eyes on the frozen frame, on the glimpse of nylon embedded in wet muscle. What do you need from me, Colonel? We have a facility in Antarctica sitting on that gate. We have evidence that some of these things have already come through, and we have no idea how far they can spread before the cold or the lack of prey slows them down. We need a containment plan that starts yesterday, and we need someone who understands how predators respond when prey starts shooting back. And if the predators keep eating the prey, I murmured, they get better at it. That is why your name is on my folder. You will be embedded with the Special Operations Team as a threat analyst. You go where they go. You tell them what it will do next and how to kill it for good. You also consult on what comes back through. Command wants options. Options. It was a short word for weapons. My first instinct was to walk. Let someone else be the one whose notes turned into kill orders and lab projects. Then I thought about that thing on the screen growing human muscle across its bones, learning how to use our gear just by chewing through us. If you pick someone who does not understand what that means, I said, you will just feed it more men while you figure it out. I will take that as a yes. I did not answer out loud. I just watched the frozen frame of the creature on the wall and wondered how many of those muscles had belonged to men who thought they were the hunters. The trip south took almost 2 days if you counted the layovers and the transport hops. By the time the last cargo plane dropped us on the Antarctic ice shelf, my body no longer cared what time it thought it was. We went from aircraft to tracked vehicle with minimal ceremony. The rest of my gear had shipped ahead. A driver with a face cracked by too many polar seasons grunted my name, checked it against a tablet, then rolled us toward the horizon. I watched the world narrow. First there were clouds, grey and heavy. Then there was only white and rock. Then white and nothing. When the vehicle finally stopped, it was in front of a low structure, half buried under groomed snow, its edges softened by drift. No signage, just a pair of blast doors and a row of antenna masts that scratched at the pale sky. The driver jerked a thumb. "Welcome to Camp Corder, Captain." "Camp Corder," I repeated. "Named after who?" He shrugged. "Somebody who did not make it home." Down inside, the base felt less like a camp and more like a bunker crossed with a ship. Narrow corridors, steel floors with grooves cut to bite boots, men moving in flows, lab coats over thermal layers, uniforms under heavier vests, faces lined by lack of sleep. My escort, a lean lieutenant with a crew cut and a clipboard, kept his stride just ahead of mine. "You will meet the team lead before you see the whole," he said. "Major Ward. He runs the Special Operations Detachment here. You are his attached asset." Asset, I muttered. Nice. He ignored the comment. We passed through 2 security checkpoints, each with scanners and bored-looking guards who did not seem bored when they checked my badge. Somewhere between those doors the base shifted. Less casual movement, more armored vests and rifles stacked in racks. A faint vibration underfoot spoke of big generators hidden deeper in the rock. The lieutenant stopped outside a heavy door with a warning sign about eye protection and live weapons training. He gave the panel a code, palmed the reader, and pushed through. The armory was busy. Men adjusted plate carriers, checked magazines, cinched straps. Weapon cases lined the walls. A range lobby opened off to one side, where muffled shots thumped a rhythm through soundproof panels. One man stood out even before I saw the rank on his chest. He was in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, broad across the shoulders in a way that came from decades of weight under rucksacks, not gym culture. Close-cropped dark hair threaded with grey at the temples, scars peeking above his collar that looked old and well-earned. He was checking a rifle with the same quiet focus another man might devote to fixing a watch. "Major Ward," the lieutenant called. "Captain King is here." Ward finished seating a magazine before he looked up. His eyes ran over me, uniform without armor, no weapon, a duffel slung from one shoulder instead of a rifle. "You the bug man?" he asked. "I study how predators and prey adapt to each other," I answered. The bugs were a summer side project. A few of the nearby operators smirked without pausing their checks. Ward did not smile. "Your file says you went on a couple of hot cleanups for bio-incidents," he went on. "But you were backfield on those. Advisory. This time you stepped through with us. No rear bench." "That is why Command gave me a rank and not a lab badge," I said. "I know how to use a rifle, Major." He looked at my hands, calluses still present but softer than his. He noticed. Of course he did. "Decent shooting on your record," he allowed. "No jump wings, no combat patch. You are my responsibility once we cross. That means what happens to you happens on me. I do not like unknowns on my flank." I set the duffel down. "I am not here to be on your flank. I am here to make sure you do not bring something back that can eat your whole doctrine and spit out a better one." That made a couple of the smirks fade. Ward let the rifle hang from its sling. "You pushed for some pretty aggressive burn policies in the prep notes." "Any man dragged off who is not recovered in one piece is gone," I answered. "I do not just mean emotionally. If you do not get him back, you treat him as enemy force multiplier. If you do get him back, and he has had sustained contact, you burn what is left. No burials, no body bags home." The room went quieter. Men kept moving, but ears had turned this way. "I have men here who did rotations with the survey team. You are telling them that if something happens, we deny their families a coffin. I am telling you that if you do not, you might end up looking down a rifle barrel held by a limb that remembers how they trained," I answered. "Ask yourself what kind of funeral that is." He held my stare just long enough to mark the challenge, then jerked his chin toward a side door. "Briefing in 10. Gear up and meet us in the portal staging area. If you have any extra nightmares you want to share, save them for when we are across and the shooting starts." The lieutenant tugged my elbow. "We have a locker for you." He got me fitted in borrowed armor and a helmet with a face shield, all slightly used. The routine parts blurred, strapping, checking, confirming I could run and shoulder a rifle without something biting into me in the wrong place. I walked through it on autopilot, brain already a few steps ahead at the hole in the ice on the far side of the base. The briefing itself was short. Ward did not waste breath on speeches. He ran through the plan in flat, practical language. First push would be a perimeter patrol on the far side to check the immediate area around the gate and confirm or refute motion sensors that had tripped overnight. No one more than 100 meters from the portal. No extended tracking. Shoot anything bigger than a dog that comes within 10 meters of a man. Burn any carcass that has touched human flesh. He did not mention body recovery aloud. The claws, burned and gone, sat between us like a second set of orders. When he finished, he looked to me. Anything you need to add, Captain? I kept it simple. If you see something that looks like it is wearing parts of our equipment, do not think trophy. Think anatomy. Assume it has learned from whoever it took those parts from. This is not random scavenging. It is remodeling. One of the younger operators, maybe mid-20s with a nervous twitch at the corner of his mouth, lifted a hand halfway. So like, it eats one of us. It becomes one of us. I shook my head. No, it eats one of you. It becomes better at killing the rest. That quieted the room more effectively than any pep talk. Ward checked his watch, then clapped his hands once. Masks on. Last checks. Move. The shaft to the gateway chamber was carved straight down through ice and rock, a vertical corridor wide enough for a freight elevator and a set of ladders. We took the elevator, packed shoulder to shoulder, rifles slung barrel down, helmets clipped. The descent felt longer than the actual time it took. Whoever dug this had gone deep. The elevator cage shuddered to a stop. The doors opened on a cavern I recognized from the footage. Only now I stood in it in 3 dimensions instead of as pixels on a screen. The air was cool and dry against the exposed skin at my jaw. Lights were bolted into the ceiling, throwing white pools across the floor. The ring stood at the far end of the chamber, its inner rim dark for the moment. Stone and ice fused together in a form no mason would claim. Cable runs from the base snaked to a control console just off to one side. A tech with a shaved head and a patch that marked him as engineering detail watched our approach with the focus of a man who knew a mistake here would end badly for all of us. Ward gave him a nod. Gate status, Kellen? Stable, Kellen answered. Power routed from main lines, redundancy on backup. You step through, you get a steady hole unless someone up top pulls us off the grid. What about the motion trip last night? Ward asked. Anything on this side? Negative. Kellen glanced at his monitors, then back up at the ring. Sensors registered mass crossing into the cavern, then dropping off. Could have been something poking its head through and going back when it did not like the taste. Could have been our gear on the far side twitching. You will know before I do. Not comforting, but honest. Ward turned to us. Masks down, check seals. Comms check by squad. On my mark, we light the hole. King, you stay behind first team by at least 3 steps until we know the footing is good. I checked my mask seal, feeling the rubber bite against skin. My rifle felt heavier than during my last range session, as if it understood what we were about to aim it at. Kellen tapped a sequence on his console. The cables feeding the ring vibrated. The inner band around the gateway brightened, not with a showy flare, but with a slow intensifying, like coals waking in a firebox. The air inside the ring thickened, shimmered, and finally settled into a surface that was not a surface, a round patch of world hanging upright. On the other side, I saw forest. It looked like someone had taken a Cretaceous painting and scrubbed out the dinosaurs, leaving only the plants. Trunks rose tall and straight, bark dark and glossy, underbrush pushed in close. The color of the leaves had a faint bluish tint under the dim sky. I felt the familiar pull in my chest again. Curiosity. Fear perched next to it like a patient bird. Ward stepped to the edge, checked his rifle one last time, then looked back at us. This is not recon for its own sake, he reminded the men. We are not here to map a continent. We are here to make sure nothing from that side gets a foothold on this one. If in doubt, we err on the side of overkill. Understood? A chorus of acknowledgements. No one sounded eager. That was fine with me. Ward stepped through. One heartbeat, he was here. The next, he was there, half a stride out into damp leaf litter, rifle up. No transition, no tunnel of light. Just a cut. The rest of the team flowed after him in pairs. I went near the middle, ducking my head slightly out of reflex as the ring filled my field of view. Crossing felt like walking through a curtain of cold mist that only existed for the thickness of a sheet of paper. For a fraction of a second, pressure clamped across my ears and sinuses, the way it does when a plane drops faster than your body likes. Then it was gone. The air on the far side hit me in the face like a different planet, warmer by at least 15 degrees than the cavern behind us. Wet. Not a sauna, not that thick, but full of moisture. The ground under my boots gave slightly, packed duff over soil, the kind of surface that forgives ankles until it does not. The sound was not Antarctica. No wind wailing across open ice, no distant machines. Here there were clicks and trills from unseen creatures, leaves rasping against each other, something larger moving a ways off. "Perimeter," Ward called over the squad net. "2 arcs, inner and outer, no one beyond 100 meters. King, with me." I moved up until I was just behind his right shoulder. From here, I could see most of the clearing the gate opened into. The ring itself behind us stood like a stone monument half buried in roots, its rear face opening onto the cavern and base lights, its front face on this side framed by climbing plants already testing its edges. "Talk," Ward murmured. "Forest density like this means ambush country," I answered quietly. "Anything big enough to worry us is either a stalker that hits from cover or a sprinter that relies on burst speed. Eyes up and down, not just ahead. And do not assume the first impact is the one that matters. Pack behavior is more likely than a lone monster that poses for cameras. You think they run in organized packs?" He kept his rifle moving in smooth arcs. "They came through from a world where everything that survives long learns tricks," I said. "Solitary ambush works for some lineages, but if they have evolved this kind of integration, they have probably tried team tactics too. The footage you showed me had one attacker, but that does not mean he ate alone." Ward took that in without comment. For the first 20 minutes, what we saw matched my notes more than my nightmares. Small creatures scattered at our approach. Something like reptiles with elongated forelimbs that they use to climb and glide from tree to tree. Small quadrupeds with thick, overlapping plates over their backs that clacked when they moved. I catalogued shapes, motion, patterns, filing details away for later. One of the plate shell creatures ventured close enough for me to get a good look. It sniffed at a discarded leaf, then froze when one of our men shifted. Its head snapped toward him. It had eyes set a little too far apart, giving it a wide field. Good for prey that needed to see danger coming from any direction. It bolted when the soldier raised his rifle slightly. "These," I murmured into the squad channel, "look like they have been living under pressure for a very long time. Nothing slow, nothing oblivious. Even the grazers are paranoid." "Comforting," one of the men breathed. We kept the patrol tight. Ward was disciplined about the distance limit, checking each man's range on his wrist display. When we reached the 100-meter mark in one direction, he curved us back toward the gate, overlapping arcs so there would be no blind zones if something decided to test us at the edge of our leash. "Movement," one of the outer men whispered. "Tree line, bearing one." I swung my rifle that way. A branch bounced where something large had passed, but whatever it was had already slipped beyond direct sight. Ward angled his head, listening. "Hold position. Let us see if it is curious." We waited. Leaves rustled. Branches swayed. No full shape. It could have been a mid-sized predator scenting us and backing off. It could have been a scout. Either way, it was smart not to commit into our overlapping fields of fire. "Mark that direction for later," Ward muttered. "We will not chase. Our mission is the immediate vicinity. We have confirmed activity. That is enough." Relief pricked under my ribs, small and guilty. Part of me wanted to push, to see what lived out there beyond our lights. A larger part wanted to get everyone back through the ring without leaving a single piece of anyone behind. We withdrew in a disciplined stagger. 2 men covering, while 2 stepped backward, then trading off. No one turned his back fully on the trees until he was almost at the ring. I crossed back near the front, turning at the last second to keep the forest in sight until the gate swallowed it. The cold of the cavern hit me again. For a moment, the The contrast made my skin sting. We stepped out into the chamber, boots clanking on metal plates. Kellen watched from his console, eyes flicking over his screens. "Any friends trying to follow?" Ward called. "Nothing on sensors," Kellen answered. "You are the only warm bodies I see making the jump." I almost let myself relax. Then something moved in the upper corner of my vision. "Contact!" one of the men on the right shouted. The thing came in fast along the chamber wall, where the rock met concrete. It must have clung to the stone in the blind spot above our lights, waiting. As we turned away from the gate, it dropped into us like a piece of the ceiling breaking loose. The first man under it, Rudd, the young operator who had asked about becoming one of us, disappeared under a blur of muscle and claws. His rifle fired once into the floor. The impact drove him onto his back, armor scraping sparks from the metal. I brought my rifle up and away from friendlies. The creature moved too quickly for a clean shot that would not take Rudd as well. It was smaller than the one from the footage, but built on the same basic blueprint. 4 limbs, each jointed for both sprinting and gripping, a long spine that flexed like a whip. Its tail wrapped around a stanchion, anchoring it as it tore at Rudd's chest rig. At first I thought the harness caught its teeth. Then I saw the truth. The straps were not separate from it. They ran under skin that had grown around them. The buckles sat half-buried. Pouches that might once have carried magazines were flattened, their fabric fused to underlying tissue. When it moved, those pouches flexed with muscle, not gravity. "Off him!" Ward barked. "Now!" 2 rifles cracked in near unison. Bullets struck the creature's flank, punching bloody pits but not knocking it clear. It flattened more of its weight on Rudd, using him as a shield, head lowering toward his throat. It was thinking in the same basic shape as we did. Use cover, close distance, deny clean shots. "Legs," I said. "Take its legs." The men on the sides adjusted aim. This time, rounds slammed into the lower limbs, breaking bone. The creature collapsed sideways, the sudden shift ripping its grip away from Rudd. It still did not let go of all of him. One clawed hand held the strap of his rifle sling. The sling wrapped around its wrist and arm, assisting its pull as it dragged Rudd half a meter closer, as if the equipment had become a natural handle. Rudd's scream cut the air. High, short, he was not dead yet. I stepped in without thinking, grabbing Rudd's free arm and hauling, trying to keep his head away from the thing's teeth. Its other forelimb swung towards me. Claws raked my forearm guard. The armor took most of it. I felt one point glance off bone. Closer now, I saw details I had missed from a distance. Its shoulder was layered with a knot of muscle that matched a human deltoid almost exactly, just expanded and reinforced. Its forearm bulged along lines that would have looked normal on a career weightlifter. Tendons traced paths I recognized from diagrams, from dissections. It had eaten a man built like us, and kept the parts that worked. Ward stepped in from my left. He fired once into the creature's skull from less than a meter away. Bone burst. The head snapped sideways. The body twitched, a series of stuttering convulsions, then sagged. Rudd lay under it, chest plate chewed, blood spreading around him in a dark halo. "Get it off him!" Ward snapped. 2 of the men grabbed the creature's limbs and heaved. It was heavy, dead weight awkward, but they rolled it enough to free Rudd's torso. Rudd's eyes opened. He tried to breathe, but each inhale turned into a wet gurgle. His throat was mostly intact, but his chest, the armor had dents that should not have been possible without a vehicle involved. Whatever force the thing had brought down with its leap had crushed more than ribs. A medic slid in, hands moving fast. He peeled plates back, checked for anything salvageable. He did not need to speak. I could read the verdict in his posture. Ward saw it too. "Time of call it now," he muttered. "He is gone." The medic hesitated. "We could... You heard the policy." Ward cut him short. He looked at me. For a second, the weight of that decision shifted my way. This was what I had pushed for in that armory. No bodies home. Burn what is left. "He is compromised," I forced out. It pinned him. It knew what to do with the sling. That means it has already eaten men who wore gear like his. The more time we give his remains intact, the more of him it can take if it is still active anywhere in there. The phrase felt monstrous even as I used it, but the science did not care what words we chose to make ourselves feel better. Ward exhaled once through his nose. "Kellen," he called, "get the incinerator crew down here. Full burn, no partials." Kellen's answer floated back from the console. "On it. I will lock down the vents and warn the upper levels." The men stepped back as two others dragged the creature and Rudd's body toward a recessed pit at the edge of the chamber where old equipment had been cut away to make room for waste disposal. Someone hit a switch. Fuel pipes rattled, then a tongue of flame licked up from the grate, blooming into a steady column. They rolled the corpse and the man together into the fire. The heat hit my face. I watched, unable to not watch, as skin blackened and split, as the fused straps and pounds of muscle cooked down. The smell was the worst part. It seemed to saturate the air so heavily that it ghosted past my mask filters, dense, greasy, and tasting like barbecue left on a grill until the fat turned bitter. It rode straight past any filter my mind tried to throw up and lodged itself in memory. Rudd disappeared quickly. Flesh shrinks fast under that kind of heat. The creature took longer, its tissues tougher, resisting. As it burned, something strange happened. One of its upper limbs, the one that had held the sling, tightened. The fingers curled inward. Nails scraped once against metal, an almost human motion, as if some part of it refused to let go of its weapon even in death. Then the tendon finally charred through. The hand uncurled and dropped. Ward stepped up beside me, watching the fire. "You saw something more than a surprise attack out there," he said quietly. "They do not just eat us and move on," I answered. "They digest us into their design. That thing moved like a man who had learned room clearing from our manuals, not like a beast with natural instincts. It used Rudd as cover. It used the sling as a tool. It knew where to land to knock the wind out of him. That is training, Major. It is training learned secondhand, through muscle memory it did not earn." Ward's gaze stayed on the flames. "So the more we send, the smarter they get. The more they eat, the better they are at using weapons," I said. "At reading formations, at outthinking us on the field we built. This is not a static threat, Ward. This is a mirror that sharpens every time we look into it." He watched until the last solid shapes in the fire collapsed into glowing coals. "Then our job is simple," he answered finally. "We make sure they run out of mirrors." The problem, I thought, was that mirrors cut both ways. Every time I stared at that gateway, I saw not just them learning from us, but us learning from them, and the men above us already wondering how to turn that into an advantage. Ward signaled the men to clear the chamber. The techs stayed behind to watch the gate and the burn pit. I took one last look at the ring, its inner rim now dark again, innocuous. It stood there like any other piece of carved stone. But the line between worlds had already blurred. We had just taught the things on the other side exactly how valuable a human soldier was as a meal. We went back through the gate 2 days after we burned Rudd. In between, the base moved like an injured animal. Slower, twitchier, every man turning his head twice at small sounds. Nobody talked about Rudd in the corridors. You saw him in the way people looked at the incinerator pit and then away. I spent most of that time upstairs in a cramped lab annex, pretending to sleep, actually watching footage, and trying not to replay the moment the creature's limb clenched in the fire. On the morning of the second day, a runner found me. "Major wants you," he said from the doorway. "Ops room." The ops room was a converted storage bay with a horseshoe of consoles and a central table showing a simplified map of the gateway clearing and a swath of forest beyond. Small markers blinked where remote sensors had been dropped over the past week. Ward stood at the table with a tablet in one hand, a mug in the other. Kellen lurked at a wall console, watching energy readouts. A third man in uniform blues rounded out the triangle. Clean haircut, clean nails, neat creases, the opposite of the field guys in every way that mattered. He wore the insignia of command staff, the type who lived on bases and flew in for oversight. Ward gestured me closer. "Captain, meet Commander Bryce." Bryce's grip was firm and brief. "I have been reading your assessments. I hope you skipped the parts where I asked for this whole complex to be buried," I answered. He almost smiled. "I read those too." Kellen tapped a key. The map expanded. Yellow rings marked last known contact points for moving masses bigger than a man. Some clusters sat closer to the gate clearing. Others lay farther out, where the forest thickened. "We got a series of hits in this sector last night," Kellen said, tapping a point well beyond our previous patrol perimeter. "Multiple passes over the same area. Whatever is there likes coming back to it." "Feeding ground," I murmured. "Or den, or both." "Exactly why we are going to look," Bryce put in. "The Council wants more than scattered patrols. They want to know where these things breed, where they change. We cannot manage what we do not understand." "And in the meantime," Ward added, "we are one motion alarm away from something stepping through while we are still writing the first chapter of the field manual." He set his mug down. The circles around his eyes looked deeper. Rudd's body had not been the only thing that burned. "We are going through for a deeper incursion," he went on. "Objective is to find whatever is triggering those clusters and plant charges to collapse the nearest access paths. If we can choke approach routes on their side, we give ourselves fewer angles to cover on ours. That is the theory. And if what we find is not just a path," I asked, "but something central, a place they depend on, then demolitions will be happy to have dragged all that explosive down the shaft," Ward answered. Bryce cleared his throat. "There is an additional objective." He slid a slim black data key across the table toward me. Old habit made me pick it up as if it might bite. "The key unlocks a compartment in your field pad," he went on. "You are now read in on Directive Helix." I looked at Ward. He watched Bryce. "What is Helix?" I asked. "The short version," Bryce answered, "is that if you encounter a specimen that has significantly integrated human traits, you are to prioritize its containment over destruction, within reason. The Council believes the long-term strategic value of such a specimen is—" I cut him off with a small exhale. "Strategic value." "Weapons research, Jordan," Ward translated quietly. Bryce did not flinch at the blunt phrasing. "Imagine a biological platform that can adapt to enemy tactics on contact, that can integrate armor, tools, even eventually vehicles into its body. We are not the only ones at this drill depth. If someone else finds a gate, I would rather we understand this field before they do. Or we could just not hand any side a self-optimizing pack of man-eating commandos," I answered. Bryce's gaze sharpened. "You studied arms races between predators and prey. You know as well as I do that anything powerful will be explored as a weapon. The choice is not between use and non-use. It is between controlled study and finding out on a battlefield that someone else got there first." He delivered it calmly, like a man reading grocery lists. That was what made it worse. "And if containment fails?" I asked. "If it eats one of your lab techs and starts using door badges and keypads better than they do? What then?" "Your role is to help us design safeguards that make that scenario unlikely," Bryce replied. "Everything else is above both our pay grades." He left the data key in my hand, turned and walked out, already reaching for his headset. Ward watched the door close. "He did not need to be that direct in front of you," I muttered. "You think he was being honest?" Ward asked. "Or you think he was laying cover?" "Both." I slipped the key into my pocket. "He has to tell us enough so we follow the plan, but if it goes wrong, he can say the wild scientist insisted on the risks." Ward looked back at the map. "If we find something Helix wants, I will need to know exactly what we are giving up if we follow this directive." "You already know," I answered. "You lose the option to end the threat cleanly." He did not argue. He just tapped the sector where the motion clusters burned brightest. "Get geared," he told me. "We move in an hour." Pre-mission routine boiled down to a checklist that could have been written by any army for any operation. Ammo, armor, radios, water, medkits, demolitions charges. The only unique additions were the flame units and the particular dread that came with knowing every round that missed now might arm whatever killed the man carrying it. Ward put together 2 squads for the deep push. An inner core that would go all the way to the motion cluster zone and a supporting ring that would hold the perimeter closer to the gate. I went with the inner group. Ward's way of briefing the men on Helix was to barely mention it. "Command wants eyes on any big creature that looks like it has been eating our people," he told them in the staging area. "In a perfect world, we tag it, blow the ground around it, and leave them something intact to dig out if they still want it. In this actual world, you do not die for a specimen. If it comes down to your life or their science project, you pick your life. Clear?" The men nodded. No one looked relieved. We all knew what it meant when science project and your life had to be balanced in the same sentence. We rode the elevator down. The gate chamber opened in front of us, ring dark. Kellen watched us from his console with a look somewhere between worry and curiosity. "Power's solid," he called. "You want a countdown?" Ward shook his head. "Just light it up." Kellen hit the sequence. The band around the ring brightened, the circle filled with forest again. Ward stepped to the edge, glanced at me once, then moved through. The rest of us followed into heat and wet air and the crackle of unseen insects. The clearing looked as it had before, but the forest beyond felt different. Maybe that was just knowing we were not turning around at 100 meters this time. "Outer ring, you know your positions," Ward said over comms. "Inner, on me. King, you are my left shoulder. We move toward the overnight hits. Stay tight." We slid into the trees. The further we got from the gate, the more the base felt like a memory. After 30 meters, you could no longer see the pale glow of the cavern through the ring. After 50, the only straight lines came from our gear. The forest floor here was a patchwork of packed soil and raised roots that twisted like ropes. Some rose to knee height, forming natural barriers. Others lay just under the surface, invisible until a boot rolled on them. The undergrowth grew denser, angled leaves big enough to cover a man's torso, edges thick and stiff, able to whip back against skin if disturbed. The air carried a steady background of animal sounds, clicks, chirps, the occasional deep call from something bigger. None of it matched any Earth recordings I knew. That was a quiet, personal kind of terror, recognizing you were completely outside your old catalogue. We saw the first predator sign less than 10 minutes in, a long, shallow groove in the soil where something had slid at speed, anchored with claws. Half-dried spatters along one side. Not blood in the human sense, but body fluid from something that had not survived the encounter. "Track it forward," Ward ordered. "See what did the killing." We advanced along the groove. It led us around a curve in the terrain where the ground dropped in a gentle bowl. At the bottom, 3 creatures circled a fourth. The 3 hunters were mid-sized, smaller than the one that killed Rudd, moving on all fours with a stance halfway between canids and apes. Their backs rose to a man's waist. Their heads had a blunt, armored front, with eyes tucked deep under a ridge. Their forelimbs were longer than their hind, giving them an overhand reach suited for grappling. Their prey was larger, something herbivorous with a barrel body and thick skin creased like dried mud. It had 4 stump-like legs ending in splayed, hoof-like structures. Plated ridges ran along its spine. The hunters had already brought it down. One clamped on a hind leg, another on the neck, the third worrying at the underbelly where the armor thinned. "Count 3, Ward murmured. "Any more in the tree line?" I scanned. The shadows between trunks held only trunks, for now. "Looks like a standard pack," I answered. "One pinning, one choking, one going for the soft spot. That is not special. We have wolves that do that. As we watched, the hunter on the neck shifted its grip to let the prey's leg kick. It did not look like an accident. The prey strained, twisting. The movement exposed the underbelly more fully to the third hunter, which lunged, burying deeper. "There is the twist," I murmured. "They are coordinating more consciously than normal, adjusting midstream, not just each following instinct." "Meaning what for us?" Ward asked. "Meaning they will test us. They will try things and keep what works." We were downwind, so the pack had not yet caught our trace. We could have left them. They were not on our direct path. "Helix care about these," one of the men whispered. "Not this batch," I answered quietly. "No gear, no human shape to them yet. They are baseline, dangerous, but not imbued with us." Ward's voice cut in. "Baseline is still threat. We are not a photography club." He motioned to two of the men. "You have shots, take them." The two chose their positions, one kneeling, one prone, rifles braced against roots. On Ward's count, they fired. The rounds tore through skulls and spine. The prey creature jerked once, then lay still. One hunter died instantly. The second stumbled and fell. The third managed a half-turn, snarling before a follow-up shot dropped it. I watched them twitch and go quiet. For a moment, the bowl was still. Then something smaller darted in from the sides. A handful of scavenger creatures, rat-sized bodies with elongated snouts and clawed forefeet, scrambled over the corpses, ignoring the still warm prey to tear at the predators' mouths. They raked teeth from the jaws and bolted away with them, like thieves stealing silverware. "What the hell?" one of our men muttered. I recorded it mentally. "They are not stupid," I murmured. "If the big ones can grow new parts from whatever they eat, the small ones may have evolved to grab and run. They do not need whole carcasses, just the good pieces." The forest was an economy, and nothing went to waste. We moved on. The terrain shifted slowly, like someone had turned a dial on the world. The ground sloped downward. The air grew heavier and still. The chatter of smaller animals faded. Root systems thinned and gave way to exposed stone, slick and dark. Our motion detectors, tied into the pads on our wrists, ticked up. "Kellen," Ward murmured over comms. "You seeing this spike?" His voice came back through the line. "Affirmative. Your sector is lighting up. Whatever is out there, it is big, and it moves through the same area repeatedly. You are close." "Copy." Ward glanced at me. "King?" "If I were designing an apex for this place, I would give it a central spot where it feeds, sheds, and regrows. Everything in the area would revolve around that. Think watering hole, but for recombination." "You think that is what we are walking into?" "I think we are about to find out what happens when evolution plays with all its toys in one place," I said. We moved with extra care now. Every step was placed, not just taken. The men spread out enough to avoid presenting a single clump, but stayed in each other's peripheral vision. The sound reached us before the sight did, a constant low sloshing, like someone stirring a vat. Then the trees opened onto a basin. It was not a lake. It was not anything Earth had prepared words for. The depression in the ground was roughly circular, sunk maybe 10 meters below where we stood. Its bottom was packed with bodies and body parts. They lay layered over each other, carcasses of prey species, predators, unidentifiable pieces, all in various states of being eaten, grown into, or discarded. Some had clearly been there for a while. Their tissues had hardened into a greyish crust. Others were fresh. Limbs twitched without the bodies they belonged to. A set of jaws chewed mechanically with nothing between them. The center of the basin held the thing that made all of it make sense and no sense at once. It sprawled across the mound of dead like a king on a throne of bones, but it had no clear front or back at first glance. Segments of it shivered, inflated, then slackened. Along its flank, plates rose and fell, opening and closing like gills. Its mass was banded in different textures: smooth hide, rough scales, something that might once have been fur but now lay in patchy clumps. And dotted across that, like ornaments hung on a nightmare tree, were human forms. The first face that registered as human watched us from near the top of the creature's side. It was half submerged, skin drawn tight, eyes open. The mouth moved weakly. No sound, just the motion. Next to it, a human hand pushed against the surface of the creature's hide, fingers splayed as if trying to climb out. The wrist vanished into the bulk. The skin around it had the waxy look of something that had grown there, not been stitched. Lower down, a torso protruded to the waist, gear still attached. The armor was the same model we wore. The man's head hung, chin to chest, but his chest rose and fell subtly in rhythm with the creature's larger breathing, as if their lungs had been connected. I felt my own breath stutter, not stopping, just catching. "What is that?" someone breathed behind me. "Metamorphosis pit," I managed. "A place where their apex feeds and changes. It drags kills here, lets its body cannibalize them, and grows new structures out of what it likes. This is where integrated traits go to settle in." Ward's voice was low. "How many of those men belong to the survey team?" "At least 2 in our gear," I answered. "Maybe more. Could be others from earlier incidents, different unit patches." One of the faces finally focused on us. His eyes found our silhouettes at the rim. He tried to form words. His lips moved, stuck, moved again. What came out was a breathy hiss that might once have been language, and now sounded like air leaking from a torn lung. He lifted an arm, or tried to. Muscles under his skin bunched. The limb jerked, then sank back into the creature's mass. "Do they know?" one of the men whispered behind me. "Do they know they are part of it?" I did not answer. There was only so much pain it helped to name. Ward steadied his rifle. "Objectives. King, how vital is this to their local system?" I watched the apex for a full 10 seconds, forcing myself to see function and not just horror. "Very. It is a hub. Prey gets dragged here. Scavengers feed at its edges. Small ones grab pieces. This thing sits in the middle and runs the high-level changes. You take it out, the balance tips. Something else will rise eventually, but there will be a window where you have fewer integrated threats." Ward's gaze did not leave the basin. "Helix wants something like this." "Helix can get a camera feed," I answered. "If you leave this alive, it will remember our faces and our habits and come looking." "We plant charges along the rim," he decided. "Bring the walls down and crush as much of it as we can." He signaled the demolitions men, who started unpacking shaped charges from their packs. Each charge was a compact block with a shaped cavity, meant to direct force into rock. The plan was simple. Set a ring of them, blow inward, let the basin collapse into a tomb. As they moved, the apex stirred. Segments of it inflated, limbs uncoiled, portions that had lain slack thickened and hardened. A cluster of eyes opened along one slope. Some were simple black orbs, others looked disturbingly human. The movement sent a wave through the heap of bodies below it. Loose limbs slid, fluid sloshed. "Time window just shrank," I muttered. "It feels us." Ward snapped into a half-crouch. "Charges fast. We might not get a second pass." The demolitions team moved quicker, hands sure despite the tension. They slapped charges onto the rock at intervals, pressed adhesive, armed detonators. As the last charge went in, the predator began to lift itself fully. What I had thought of as its underside rose from the mound, revealing more structure. It had grown something like a set of ribbed arches underneath, thick enough to support its girth, each segment ending in splayed foot-like structures that dug into the substrate. Those arches were traced with cable-like tendons, some clearly lifted from terrestrial forms, human, herbivore, perhaps others, twisted together. Along its forward section, new limbs had sprouted. They were not natural. They were ours. Human arms protruded from sockets along its flank, shoulders bolstered with extra muscle, forearms wrapped in embedded harness webbing. Hands, some gloved, some bare, flexed in testing motions. A few clutched metal. At first I thought they were random scraps. Then I realized what they held. Pieces of rifles, grips, stocks. A whole weapon, twisted, barrel bent, but still recognizable, was strapped into a mass that might once have been a shoulder. The motion of the larger body adjusted, and the gun lifted, brought to bear. "It is carrying weapons," one of our men hissed, "like a turret." "Down," Ward snapped. We threw ourselves behind the nearest rocks and roots as a burst of gunfire tore through the space we had occupied seconds earlier. The shots were wild, but not random. The cluster of human eyes had tracked our movement. The fused gun spat rounds along that line. "I thought they did not understand firearms," one of the men grunted, already adjusting his own aim. "They did not at first," I answered, crawling behind a boulder. "Now they have had time." Smaller predators emerged from tunnels near the basin edges, drawn by their apexes stirring. They moved with purpose, angling up the slopes, using bodies as cover, converging on the easiest approach routes to our position. "They are not just reacting," I said into the net. "They are maneuvering to pin us against the rim." "Then we do not let them get above us," Ward replied. "King Kellen, I am calling in Helix's wet dream. We have an apex integrated with multiple human forms and gear. The question is whether we clear this place or hold back." Kellen's response came layered with distant noise from the control room. "Stand by." The wait felt longer than it could possibly have been. I watched through my scope as one of the embedded human faces turned toward us. His lips moved again. Beyond him, a small predator scrambled over his shoulder like he was just terrain. A new voice cut into the channel, crisp and certain. "Bryce." "Ward, hold charges," Bryce ordered. "Priority is containment, not destruction. You are authorized to stabilize the area and mark egress routes, but you will not trigger demolitions on the apex without direct approval. We are taking fire from a creature carrying our rifles in its skin. It has members of our survey team in its surface, breathing. If we let this thing live, it will walk to the gate eventually." "Understood," Bryce answered. "We need it intact. You have flame units. Drive it back, limit its mobility, force it deeper into its pit. We will send a containment cage through in the next phase." "The next phase," Ward repeated. Rounds from the apex's mounted gun struck the rock near his head, spraying chips. He flinched, more out of reflex than fear. "You are asking me to risk my men," Ward went on, "to preserve a threat that is actively shooting at them, for a capture plan we have never rehearsed, inside a world where we have zero structural control." "That is correct," Bryce replied, "and it is not a request. Directive Helix stands. You will not detonate those charges." Ward ducked as another burst of gunfire stitched across our cover. "Copy," he muttered, but I could hear the effort it took. He cut his mic locally and turned to me. "Is there any scenario where we keep that thing alive and do not regret it?" he asked. "You already know the answer," I told him. He gave a humorless snort. "Yeah." He reopened the net. "All units adjust. Flame units focus on the lower limbs. We want it off balance and looking inward, not charging up here. Keep the small ones off our backs. Do not engage the embedded human forms. That is not the man you knew. That is target camouflage." That line sat heavy in the channel. No one wanted to shoot at a face that still blinked, even if it no longer owned itself. We fought. The flame teams advanced to the rim, staying low. They opened up in controlled bursts, jets of fire arcing down to sweep across the apex's supporting limbs. Flame licked at its underside, skin darkened and cracked. The creature recoiled, shifting weight away from the worst of it. Its body curled around the burned sections, exposing others. Its improvised gun jerked, muzzle climbing. Whatever coordination ran through it did not like fire. The smaller predators surged up the sides, some catching fire, others leaping over fallen comrades. Our rifles snapped and barked, cutting them down. For every one that fell, another appeared, drawn by whatever signal the apex gave off. "Charges are placed?" I called to the demolitions man nearest me. He checked his pad. Ring complete, all armed, all tied to a single trigger. Range on the blast. Enough to bring in the rim, he answered. You hit the switch, we turn that basin into a blender. Ward heard us. We are not. A round caught one of the flame carriers in the hip. He stumbled. The nozzle of his unit swung wide, jets sweeping across a section of rim where two other men crouched. Flame washed over them before the safety cutoff tripped. One went down screaming, armor cooking against his skin. The other rolled, patting at patches that had ignited on his gear. Medic! Someone yelled. The Apex registered the weakness like any predator would. It surged, using its arches to drive its mass upward, trying to crest the basin wall. One of its limbs planted on the exact stretch of rock where 3 charges sat buried under thin layers of soil. I did the math without meaning to. Time to breach if it got over us. Time to drag away another man. Time for those human faces in its hide to see the gate and take a craving for the world beyond, back down into whatever passed for its mind. Ward, I called. We are not going to hold this line forever. I know, he snapped. We are feeding it a live fire exercise, I pushed. Every second it watches us, it learns. You stall for Helix, you are giving it our playbook. Another limb found purchase, hauling more of its bulk up. Rubble slid under it. One of the embedded torsos scraped along rock, leaving a smear. Through my scope, I locked eyes with the man half-grown into its side. For an instant, there was recognition. Not of me, but of our uniform, our gear, the shape of a rifle held a certain way. His lips moved again. I did not know if he tried to beg for death or for rescue. Either way, letting him live like that felt like a worse cruelty than burning his remains ever could have. Ward's breathing rasped in my ear over comms. He had not muted his mic this time. Under the gunfire and the shrieks, I heard his decision crawl to the surface. King, he muttered. If we do this, we both burn our careers. Careers, I answered, are not what this thing is hungry for. He let out a breath through his teeth. Demolitions. On my mark. Command will hear the trigger spike, the demolitions man warned. They can court-martial me later, Ward replied. Mark. The Apex hauled itself another meter. Small predators swarmed around its base, using its mass as moving cover. Flame washed over one side, but the other still advanced. Trigger, Ward ordered. The demolitions man thumbed the switch. Nothing happened. Fault, the man choked. No detonation. I am not getting feedback. The Apex's gun barked again, rounds striking close enough for rock chips to sting my cheek. Something had gone wrong in the chain. Either a miswire, a failed detonator, or an override from upstairs. Kellen's voice hacked into the channel. We are reading a lockout on your detonation signal. Control, cut it. They slammed a block on your transmit the moment they saw the arming code. I'm trying to bypass, but they are faster than I am. Bryce had not trusted us. He had put a digital leash on our explosives before we ever stepped through. The Apex was almost at the rim. Fine, Ward snarled. We do it the old way. Give me a manual option. The charges are set for remote, the demolitions man argued. They are not. We have grenades, I cut in. And fire. We do not need all of them to go. We just need enough. Old habit pulled my thoughts into a new track. If the remote link was jammed, the detonators themselves might still respond to direct stimulus. They were built to be robust, but nothing was perfect under heat and shock. We dropped frags into the closest cluster. I went on, already crawling along the rim toward one of the charges. We hit them hard enough. We might trigger a sympathetic blast. Set off the next, then the next. Chain reaction, Ward grunted. Messy, but I have seen worse plans. He crawled along from the other side, keeping low. The Apex lifted a limb toward him, claws extended, reaching. Draw its attention, he barked over the squad net. Pour fire into its eyes. The men obeyed. Rifles hammered, rounds sparking off armored plates, some finding softer spots. The cluster of human-like eyes along its flank burst one by one. The creature recoiled, shifting weight, turning its bulk toward the new threat. I reached the nearest visible charge. It sat under a lip of rock, wires snug, casing snug. My fingers found it by feel. I popped the access panel, saw the detonator seated within, its core waiting for a jolt that the blocked remote could no longer provide. I pulled a grenade from my harness. Old, simple tech. Pin, handle, timed fuse in a metal shell. "Ward," I called. "On my toss." "Do it!" I yanked the pin with my teeth, spat it, and counted under my breath. 1, 2, 3. I dropped the grenade into the shallow gap in the rock where wires ran, then flung myself sideways, throwing an arm over my head. The blast slammed against my back, a hard shove. For a heartbeat, I heard nothing but a high, piercing tone. Dust and chips rained over me. Then, behind the first blast, a deeper roar. A second charge went, then a third. The ground under my chest lurched. The rim of the basin cracked along a new line. Whole slabs of rock sheared inward, tumbling into the pit. The apex, caught mid-ascent, lost purchase. Limbs scrabbled, claws gouging. For a moment it hung there, parts of it over the edge, parts still in the basin. Then, gravity won. The creature fell back, bringing tons of stone with it. The collapsed rim followed, half burying its body. Segments of it twisted and flailed under the rock, crushing embedded bodies, pinning limbs, splattering fluids. Shockwaves rippled through the heap of corpses below. Small predators were crushed outright or flung aside. Dirt plumes rose. For a few seconds, the forest around us went strangely quiet. Even the background animal sounds cut off, as if the whole area held a breath. I rolled onto my back, chest heaving, ears ringing, and stared at the fractured edge of the basin. Chunks of the apex still protruded here and there. An arm here, a segment there, but most of it lay under rubble. "King," Ward's voice crackled in my ear. "You alive?" I took quick inventory. Bruises, scrapes, no gear blown off. "Still here." "Everyone sound off," he ordered. Voices responded, some steadier than others. We had lost at least one man to the blast. No answer from the flame carrier who had taken the hip shot. No sign of him near the rim. "He might have gone into the pit," someone muttered. "If he did," Ward replied, "he is gone. Do not go looking." The words slipped out of him with a weight I understood too well now. Kellen's voice came through a moment later. "What the hell just happened out there? We got partial detonation signatures. You dropped off sensors for a second. Motion in your area spiked and then crashed." "We improvised," Ward answered. "Remote was locked. We built our own trigger." "You violated a direct order," Bryce cut in, voice hard. "Helix's specimen—" "Helix can dig in the rubble if it still wants something to poke," Ward snapped. "My men come home. That is my directive." I fully expected Bryce to start talking about chains of command and insubordination. Instead, there was a long pause, then a controlled reply. "Understood," he ground out. "Pull back to the gate. We will discuss this topside." Ward glanced at me. "You heard him. Inner team, withdraw. Stay sharp in case something else wants to test us on the way out. We just made a lot of noise." We skirted the damaged rim, giving the basin a wide berth. The apex still twitched now and then under the rock, reflexive spasms with no real aim. One embedded human face lay crushed between boulders, features flattened beyond recognition. It was horrible. It was also, in a way I did not say aloud, a mercy. The walk back to the gate felt longer than the approach. Every root and branch had to be navigated with gear that now carried a new layer of dust and blood. The men were quieter, breath coming in harsher draws. We had gone deeper, seen more, and done something we could not take back. At the edge of the clearing, the ring waited, its view of the cavern beyond like a window in a house that no longer felt like ours. Ward halted us just short. "Last look," he muttered, glancing over his shoulder at the forest. "King?" I scanned the tree line one more time. No movement beyond the usual. No sign of something bigger stalking us. For now. "We hurt them," I said. "We did not end them. But we took a piece they cannot easily grow back. They will adjust. So will we. The race just got faster, he grunted. Story of our species. We stepped back through the gate. Cold hit, concrete under my boots, the familiar arc of the cavern ceiling, Kellen at his console, skin pale under his stubble. A flight of stairs up to the rest of the base, where Bryce and the others would be waiting with their questions and their reprimands. Behind my breastbone, something knotted and pulled. Part of it was simple adrenaline crash. Part of it was the image of that basin, that apex stitched together from everything it had ever eaten, including us. Another part was the knowledge that Bryce was not wrong about other nations, other gates. We had just proven something important, whether we meant to or not. The creatures could be hurt. Their hubs could be collapsed. But in doing that, we had also demonstrated that a handful of men with the right knowledge could bring down a super predator that had ruled a chunk of its world. We had shown, in cruel clarity, the overlap between containment plan and weapon demonstration. Ward clapped a hand on my shoulder, briefly, grounding. "Debrief in 15, he muttered. "Get your arm looked at." Only then did I realize my forearm guard still carried the gouge from the earlier fight. Beneath it, blood had dried in a thin line where a claw had slipped under the edge. I flexed my fingers. The joint twinged. "I'm fine," I started. He lifted one eyebrow. "I will see the medic," I corrected. The scan looked clean until the tech zoomed in. I sat on the edge of the med bunk, forearms strapped into a brace, while the imaging unit combed up and down my arm. The unit was a metal arch on a sliding rail, the kind hospitals use for quick, shallow tissue scans. On the monitor, my bones showed as pale cylinders, muscles as layered grey. "Hold still," the tech muttered. "I am sitting." "You are flexing," he grumbled. "Quit flexing." I watched my own arm in cross-section. Around the old claw gouge, the tissue looked thicker than it should. I had chalked that up to swelling. The tech dragged a fingertip along the magnified view. "There." A faint thread ran through the muscle, darker than the rest. It reminded me of ivy root creeping through brick. It branched once, then again. I frowned. "That is not mine." "No," he agreed. "It is not." He switched to a different filter. The thread glowed in contrast, bright against the grey around it. "Foreign tissue," he went on. "Not metal, not plastic, not bone fragment. Some kind of organic strand. It is woven into your muscle." My first thought was infection. My second was worse. "You took a sample?" I asked. He nodded toward a tray, where a small vial sat labelled with my name and an incomprehensible string of letters and numbers. A fine smear of tissue floated in suspension. "Lab is running it now," he said. "Initial look under the scope was strange." "Strange how?" "Cells do not look like yours," he answered. "But they're not free-floating either. They latch onto your fibers. They do not spread sideways much. They follow the existing grain. Like ivy and brick. Like human muscle on a predator's bones. Do I need to worry about it turning the rest of me into that thing?" I asked. "Right now it is small," he said. "Think splinter, not branch. No sign it is throwing off new pieces. But it is not just lying there. It is tied in. Whatever scratched you left more than a cosmetic mark." He did something on the console. The image froze, the brighter strand highlighted. He printed a copy onto a hard sheet and clipped it to a board with my name. "Doctor will want to talk to you," he muttered, then checked the time. "Everyone will, actually." I heard boots in the corridor before the door opened. Ward stepped in, helmet tucked under one arm, face drawn. He scanned the room, clocked the monitor, and the tech's posture. "That from the wound?" he asked. "Best we can tell," the tech answered. "We pulled all the obvious foreign matter right after you got back. This was not obvious." Ward studied the frozen image. "So it left a souvenir." "More like it left a hook," I said. "Something that likes living inside my structure instead of on its own." Ward's gaze flicked from the image to my face. "You feel any different?" "Tired," I answered. "Sore, annoyed. Nothing that screams turning into apex horror yet. Let us keep it that way, he muttered. He tapped the printed sheet with one knuckle. Command is going to use this to argue their case, he went on. If the predators can leave bits of themselves in us, the eggheads will call you a living interface. I am a man, not a bridge. You are both now, a new voice put in from the doorway. Bryce stepped inside, uniform neat as if the base were a parade ground and not a scar under the ice. His eyes went straight to the scan, then lingered on me. You have alien tissue integrated into your musculature. You also have experience surviving contact where others did not. That makes you uniquely valuable. To Helix, I guessed. To all of us, he corrected. We need to understand how contact changes not just them but us. You might feel fine today. We do not know what the long game looks like. Ward crossed his arms. If you are here to ask for biopsies, get in line behind the doctor. I am here to tell you that what happened at the pit has not gone unnoticed, Bryce replied. Higher levels are furious you blew the charges without authority. And yet we are all still breathing, which we would not be if that thing had climbed out of its bowl, Ward answered. They are also impressed, Bryce continued. You faced an apex on its own ground and lived. You improvised a workaround when our lockout failed you. They consider that initiative, even if it technically counts as insubordination. So am I punished or promoted? Ward asked. That depends on how today goes, Bryce said, because your night is not over. He touched his earpiece. They are ready. I opened my mouth to ask what he meant. The base answered first. A warning tone knifed through the medwing, sharp and insistent, not the calm, slow chime of a drill. The urgent pattern everyone recognizes even if they have never heard it before. Lights along the corridor outside shifted from white to red. The tech flinched and grabbed for his console. Ward was already moving. Report. Motion at the gate, Bryce snapped. Big spike, multiple sources. Sensors on the far side are going blind one by one. Whatever survived that pit just found its feet and it is coming back to the door. Ward handed me my helmet. Suit up! The tech started to object. His arm, he can shoot, Ward cut across. If he cannot, he can still think. We need him in the room. He tossed me a fresh forearm guard. I buckled it over the wounded limb, more to keep the arm from being jostled than to stop anything sharp. Part of me wondered if the embedded tissue liked the pressure. We moved with the flow of bodies toward the elevators. Men poured out of side rooms and corridors, battle gear clicking and snapping into place as they ran. Overhead, the alarm cut to make room for an all-call. All security and special operations personnel report to the gateway chamber. A voice from control announced. Repeat, all security and special operations to the gateway chamber. Level 2 containment protocol in effect. Level 2 meant the threat was not hypothetical. It meant something hostile had been confirmed on the far side moving toward the ring. Level 1 was drills. Levels above 2 were things no one wanted to think about. In the elevator, bodies pressed close. No one spoke. I could hear breathing, the subtle grind of metal on metal as weapons shifted. Ward stood next to me, helmet on now, visor up. If it got out from under the rim, it learned something important, he muttered. That rock will not stop it twice, I answered. No, he agreed. It learned the shape of the trap. The elevator shuddered to a stop. When the doors slid open, the layout of the gateway chamber looked the same as always. Ring at the far end, cables running to Kellen's console, incinerator pit off to the side. What changed was the number of guns. Squads clustered in assigned positions along half walls and raised platforms built into the chamber for this exact scenario. These were kill corridors, staggered cover arranged so that anything coming off the ring would have to cross open ground while we fired from multiple angles. Above, embedded into the ice rock ceiling, were dark rectangles like skylights with no glass. In each rectangle sat a blocky device about the size of a small car engine. The ice collapse charges. If triggered, they would explode upward and outward, forcing the ice above to crack and fall, burying the chamber. They had built all of this with one principle in mind. If containment fails, bury the whole problem. Kellen looked up from his console as we joined him. Motion on the other side is big and focused, he reported. Our sensor grid on that side is dropping like teeth. Either something is smashing them deliberately, or they are going down under mass. You ever seen anything like this pattern? Ward asked. No. Last time we had a big spike, it was the apex waking up in its basin. This is bigger, and it is moving in a straight line for the gate. No hunting loops, no flanking behavior. It is coming direct. Drawn by memory of the opening. Drawn by the taste of us. Any chance it is just leaving? Ward asked. Kellen looked at him. Right, Ward muttered. Wishful thinking. Bryce arrived with a small cluster of staff officers, all in armor light enough to suggest they did not plan on getting near the front line. He moved straight to Kellen's console. Status, he demanded. Gate is idle at the moment, Kellen answered. Power standing by. Motion on the far side is at the edge of the clearing. I can light it for a peek. Do it, Bryce ordered. He glanced at Ward. We stick to the plan this time. What plan? I asked. Kellen's fingers moved across his board. Draw-through mode. He glanced at me. We have a way to temporarily reverse the pressure differential across the ring. Think of it as turning the gate into a giant hook. We widen it, increase field strength, and anything close on the far side gets dragged in. Then we drop a cage on it. He pointed to the ceiling behind us. Suspended on rails bolted into the rock above the open floor behind the gate was a metal cage the size of a small house. Its frame was thick bars of some alloy I did not recognize, cross-braced with internal supports. Projectors mounted along the top and corners hummed quietly, linked by cables to a separate control rack. Inside, the floor was solid plate studded with anchor points. I had walked past that structure before, half hidden under tarps. I had assumed it was construction equipment or a support frame for future expansion. When we trigger draw-through, we move that into position and drop it, Bryce explained. Trap the apex inside, then hit it with everything we have that does not explode. Shock, heat, gas, whatever works without rupturing the bars. Ward grimaced. You did not mention that it was built over the main access to the exit stairs. The stairs have second routes. Bryce waved it off. Focus. We bring it here, cage it, then decide what to do. For Helix, I murmured. For all of us, he countered. On Kellen's screens, the motion trace reached the edge of the clearing. A separate window showed a grainy visual feed from a surviving sensor. The forest on the far side shook. Trees bent as something pushed through them. Smaller creatures scattered ahead of it. Grazers, scavengers, mid-tier hunters. Some fled, some tried to dart in and steal bits of whatever the big one rolled across. Most ended underfoot. The apex broke into the clearing like a landslide. It was bigger than it had been at the pit. Some of that was perspective, seeing it from the front instead of above, but not all. New segments jutted from its sides. It had grown extensions that acted like outriggers, stabilizing its mass as it moved. These were supported by limbs clearly adapted for load-bearing. Streaks of pale rock dust still clung to parts of its hide. In places, rubble had fused in, becoming armor. Embedded human forms were fewer. Most of those had been crushed in the collapse. The ones that remained were set more deeply, closer to the core. It moved with purpose, heading straight for the gate. Draw through ready on my mark, Bryce ordered. We experience this on our ground, not theirs. Once it crosses, we lose even the illusion of separation. We lose control if it stays out there free to slip around the gate and find another way up, Bryce snapped. At least here we know the exits. Kellen, now. Kellen's hands hesitated for one heartbeat, then moved. The band around the ring brightened beyond its usual level. The surface inside deepened, tones shifting, like a pond darkening under sudden cloud. Field strength at 60%, Kellen announced. 70, 80. Any higher and we risk structural stress on the ring. Hold at 80, Bryce ordered. That will be enough. On the monitor, the apex hit the edge of the clearing and hesitated. It raised part of its mass, as if scenting something in the air. Then it moved towards the gate faster. It feels it, I murmured. Whatever sense it uses for orientation, it feels the change and wants it. Good, Bryce breathed. Or it recognizes this as unnatural and wants to stop it, I added. He ignored that. Move the cage, he ordered. A klaxon blared overhead, motors engaged. The huge cage rolled along its rails with a series of jolts, then crept into place in front of the ring, suspended a few meters off the floor. Its underside gleamed, the solid plate waiting to land. Drop when it is halfway through, Bryce barked. We want as much of it on our side as possible. Ward leaned close enough for me to hear him without comms. You ever think you would live to see grown men root for a man-eating tank to charge their position? Not in this specific configuration, I murmured. The apex reached the gate on the monitor. It slowed, portions of its body spreading, as if tasting the boundary. Small predators around it pulled back, unwilling to cross. Then, in one coordinated heave, it pushed a third of its bulk through. The ring surface bulged on our side. The air in the chamber compressed, sudden and sharp. Moist heat blew out around the ring like a breath. A section of the apex emerged, limbs, plates, a cluster of eyes, part of a torso fused into its side. On instinct, the closest men raised rifles. Ward flung an arm down in a chopping motion. Hold, he said. No weapons that risk damaging the cage. Now, Bryce urged. Drop it. Kellen hit the command. Hydraulic arms released. The cage dropped with a heavy thud, the floor plate slamming onto the chamber floor just ahead of the ring. Dust puffed up around its base. For a moment, the apex was caught with part of its body protruding through the ring, mass wedged between field and bars. It surged, pushing, trying to force more of itself through, then recoiled, trying to yank back. Fire projectors, Bryce ordered. Energy arced from the fixtures mounted along the top of the cage, striking the visible segments. The apex spasmed, limbs lashed against the bars. One embedded human face pressed into the metal rods, teeth bared in a soundless scream. Keep it on, Bryce called. Cook it. For a few seconds, it seemed as if the plan might actually work. The visible flesh blackened in strips. Segments drooped. The cluster of eyes on the closest portion clouded. Then the field around the ring flickered. Field stability dropping, Kellen said. Stress on the rim spiking. Something is straining the resonance. What is that in plain words? Ward demanded. The gate does not like having half a mountain jammed into it. The apex shifted tactics. Instead of pulling, it braced. Sections of its body flattened against the cage floor. New limbs sprouted along its underside like emergency struts, drove down, anchoring it. Its main mass flexed, bulging outward into the gaps between bars, filling them. Muscles thickened where metal pressed. In places, bone-like structures extended, hardening into braces. It was learning the cage in real time, remodeling itself to live inside confinement. It is wedging, I said. It is using the bars as a frame to grow around. The more you shock it, the more it reacts by stiffening against the points of contact. Turn it off, Ward said. You are helping it build armor. Bryce hesitated, torn between instinct and theory. Then he nodded to Kellen. Stop the beam. The arcs cut. The smell faded. The apex did not relax. It continued to press outward until the bars visibly bowed. One snapped with a violent crack, shearing toward the ceiling. Another bent just enough that a limb could push through. Men nearest the cage fell back, tripping over their own boots in the scramble. Open fire, Ward commanded. Everything short of grenades. Rifles, shotguns, mounted machine guns. All of it exploded at once. Rounds hammered into the visible portions of the creature, shredding exposed tissue. Chunks flew. Some fell outside the cage, flopping on the floor like fish. Small predators drawn through the gate behind the apex darted in to snatch those pieces and drag them back toward the ring. One of them carried a torn chunk of flesh with a human ear still attached. "Do not let them take samples back," I shouted. "They do not just feed, they seed." Some of the secondary teams shifted focus, picking off the scavengers as they ran. It helped, but there were too many paths, too much chaos. A new sound cut through, the grate of metal yielding under forced expansion. Another bar snapped, a limb thrust through the gap, ending in a hand grown from overlapping human fingers, extra joints added. It clamped onto the outer frame and pulled. The whole cage tipped slightly, one corner lifting off the floor. "Stability compromised," Kellen called. "If that thing throws its weight sideways, the cage will come off the rails. Once it does, I have no way to keep it from rolling any direction it wants." Ward tracked the apex's movements, mind running calculations as fast as mine. "It is not trying to escape toward the back of the chamber," he realized. He was right. Every time the creature shifted, it angled its efforts toward our side of the gate and the main exit corridors, not the far end of the room. Why come this way when it could break the cage and retreat home? "Because it is not just escaping," I answered. He shot me a look. I was watching the pattern of its attacks. The limbs that lashed through the bars did not flail at random. They struck at specific targets. The mounted guns, the men giving orders, the consoles. Twice, one limb snapped toward Kellen's station before being forced back. "It is hunting up the chain. It went for the hub on its side. Now it wants the hubs on ours. It will not waste effort on the rank and file when it can eat the ones who shaped the battle. That means you, and me, and Bryce. It remembers who hurt it. Any predator that can rewrite its own body to hold a rifle is smart enough to recognize the man pointing a finger and changing the fight." Almost as if on cue, one of its limbs thrust through the bars straight toward us. It was shorter than the others, thick with reinforced muscle, skin patterned with scraps of fabric that might once have been uniforms. At the end, the hand had far too many knuckles. It slammed into the half wall in front of us, smashing concrete. Shards flew. A jagged piece clipped my helmet, jolting my head. Another struck Bryce in the chest. He staggered back. His armor took the blow, but he lost his footing, crashed into a bank of equipment, and landed hard. The limb groped, feeling for more. I fired into the mass where the limb joined the body. It jerked, withdrew part way, then pushed again. It was not a simple reflex. It was insistence. "Captain King," Bryce rasped, pulling himself up. "We still have options." "Options that do not involve letting this thing loose," Ward snapped. "There are emergency flood doors," Bryce argued, pointing toward the tunnels leading deeper into the base. "We can seal it in this chamber, bleed it down, then bring in heavier equipment." "It will not stay put long enough for bureaucracy," Ward shot back. "And if it does, every second we watch it, it watches us. You saw what it did to that cage in less than a minute." Another limb punched through a different gap in the bars, this one lower, clawing at the floor. It found a body, a soldier who had fallen earlier, and hooked him. The limb dragged the corpse closer to the ring, to a section of the apex's side where a mouth like a vertical slit opened, lined with new teeth. I watched those teeth snap down around the man's armor. The creature chewed once, twice, then held still. The strand in my arm seemed to buzz, as if it recognized its parent through layers of air and gear. I ignored it. "If this thing gets free in here, it will learn the layout of the base in one pass," I said. "We have scatter plans, fallback positions, safe rooms. All of that is built around assumptions. It will chew through those assumptions and grow new bone around them." "I'm not asking for philosophy," Ward growled. "I'm asking for a way to end this. There is only one. We drop the ceiling." The ice collapse charges looked quiet and innocent above us. "They are rigged to bury the ring and this chamber," Ward replied. "We still have men in here. We have the entire upper structure sitting on top of us." "You heard Kellen," I countered. "The ring is straining. If it fails with that thing half in and half out, we do not know what will happen. We might get a blowback that rips a crater in the ice or opens another breach somewhere we cannot see. We do know that if it survives and retreats, it will come again. Stronger." Bryce pushed up, clutching at the console for balance. "We are not dropping those charges. That is a last resort. We can still—" He broke off as another limb lashed through the cage, this one from a segment closer to the gate, narrower, ending in a cluster of sharper digits that looked grown specifically for piercing. It speared him through the thigh and yanked. Bryce went down screaming. The limb dragged him toward the bars. His fingers scrabbled at the floor, leaving streaks. Ward lunged, grabbed Bryce's arms and pulled. For a moment, it was a tug of war, Major versus Predator, man versus limb. Then a rifle cracked from somewhere off to our right. The round hit the limb where it entered Bryce's flesh. The impact made it flinch. Its grip slipped. Ward used the moment to haul Bryce clear. The limb snapped back into the cage with a whip-like motion. Bryce clutched his leg, armor split, blood seeping. He looked up at the cage, at the ring, at the ceiling. "Do it," he gasped. "Drop it. Drop the charges. That is an order." "You sure?" Ward asked quietly. Bryce laughed once, sharp and raw. "If that thing eats me, it eats my clearance. I'm not giving it my codes." Kellen's knuckles whitened on his console. "Charges need dual authorization," he called. "One from Control, one from Field Command. That was the design. No single man can bury a multinational base on his own word." Bryce slammed his hand onto the console, triggering his half. "Control authorizes." He glared at Ward. "You either complete the chain, Major, or you explain to every family why you did not." Ward looked at me. He did not need my answer. We both knew it. But he wanted me on the hook with him. "We are not going to get a better moment," I said. "But if we drop them now, we kill a lot of our own. We need that thing at the center, pinned, not halfway out. We need to anchor it." He caught the word. Anchor. "Meaning," he pushed. "Meaning we have to get close," I said. "Deep enough that when the charges go, it takes the weight on its main mass. If the collapse hits mostly empty cage and floor, it might tear free and wedge somewhere else." "You want to get under it?" Ward said slowly, as if testing the shape of the idea with his tongue. "Not under," I answered. "In." He stared. "You have that strand in your arm. You think that gives you some kind of immunity?" "No. I think it makes me a preferred target. You saw how it behaved at the pit. It pulled in the kills it wanted most, where they would do it the most good. I am half-scented already. It will come for me if I give it the chance." He shook his head once, sharp. "You are not volunteering to be bait for this." "I am not volunteering. I am recognizing that I already am. It is hunting the heads of the snake. I am one of them whether I like it or not." We locked eyes for a heartbeat. Under the gunfire and the screams, under the rumble of the apex straining against the cage, there was a quieter exchange. He had lost men under my advice before. He was not eager to lose the one man who seemed to understand this enemy. "Walk me through it. Fast. The cage floor is solid. If I go in under the bars, bait it into grabbing me with something that opens a big enough wound, I can plant a charge inside the tear. We know its body likes to close around foreign objects. It will hold it. You trigger the ceiling. The blast inside plus the fall from above should be enough to crush its core." "We have compact charges," one of the demolitions men cut in, overhearing. "Shapeable. Meant for breaching, not mass demolition. But if you put one inside a cavity, it will turn whatever is around that cavity into shrapnel." Ward rounded on him. "You are not supposed to think this is a good idea." "I do not," the man said. "But I know what those charges can do." "Draw-through is still active," Kellen called. "The ring field is holding, but barely. If you go in there, you will have the gate at your back and an apex in front. You screw up, and it drags both of you through." "That is why we do not screw up," I answered. Ward grabbed my vest. "If you die in there, it eats you. It eats you and all your insights, all your models, everything you learned about it. Better that than it eats me and half the base while we watch." He let go. "You get 30 seconds. You do not find your opening by then, I drag you back out whether you like it or not." 30 seconds is generous," I said. "In those pits, most fights were over in less than 10. He snorted once. You are not helping. One of the demolitions men rummaged in his pack, pulled out a compact charge about the size of my palm encased in a rubber housing. A short length of cable trailed from it, ending in a simple deadman trigger, a grip that would close a circuit when released. "Hold this down," he instructed. "You let go, it starts the countdown. 3 breaths, not many more. That should give just enough delay for someone to yank you free before it goes off in your hand. I would like my hand to still be attached when that happens. Then do not drop it early." I slid the charge into a pouch on my chest rig, threading the trigger cable under my vest so the grip rested in my palm. My fingers curled around it. It felt lighter than it should. Ward leaned close. "You go in. You focus on keeping its attention. Do not play hero past that. You get the charge in. You fight like hell to get out. We will handle the ceiling." "Copy." "Jordan," he added, dropping rank for once. "I am not burying you in there if I can help it." "I know. That is why I trust you with the shovel." He barked a rough laugh that sounded nothing like humor. Then he turned to the rest of the room. "Everyone not directly covering King, shift your fire to the opposite side of the cage," he called. "Draw limbs away from his path. Kellen, primaries on the ice collapse charges. When I give the word, you do not wait for a third opinion. You pull the roof." "You get caught under that fall," Kellen warned. "I cannot dig you out." "Understood," Ward replied. He looked at me once more. "Go." I moved. Getting into the cage meant crossing open ground. I went low, using shattered concrete and equipment banks as partial cover. Shots cracked overhead. A limb lashed close enough that I felt the air shift. I slipped under the cage's bottom edge, where it sat slightly raised by the apex's pressure, belly to the floor, and rolled inside. The heat hit first. The beams they had fired earlier had warmed the space. The creature's own body added more. Air lay heavy, damp, full of the ancient dampness of meat and something else that had never been on Earth until now. From inside, the apex felt bigger. The visible segments curved above and around me like a living wall. Surfaces twitched, rose, fell. Mouths opened and closed in places where no mouth belonged. Some exhaled, others did not. I kept to the edges at first, near the bars. Limbs thrashed overhead, focused on the external threat. I needed one of them to focus inward. "Come on," I murmured. "You wanted me. Here I am." The strand in my arm burned, a thin line of heat running from wrist to elbow. Something in the creature recognized something in me. A limb descended. This one was shorter than the others, less armored, ending in a hand that looked almost human at first glance. 5 fingers, a thumb. Then I saw the extra joint on each digit, the tendons braided thicker than any natural anatomy. It reached toward me, not flailing. It touched. Fingers brushed my helmet, my shoulder plates, trailing, exploring. When they found the gap at my neck, they lingered, pressing hard enough to test but not yet crush. It was curious. It was tasting shape. I forced myself not to shoot. If I spooked it into a simple strike, it might crush me outright, leaving no cavity to use. The limb slid down my chest, pressing against my rig. It brushed the pouch where the charge sat. My hand tightened reflexively around the trigger grip. The fingers paused there. Something rippled along the limb. Muscles bunched, like a man preparing to lift. Then it struck. Claws, hidden until now, sprang from the fingertips, punching through vest and into the flesh beneath. Pain flared white, then settled into a deep, hot throb. I could feel each point as a separate brand. The limb lifted me off the floor. My boots left the ground. My body swung, armor clanking against the bars as the limb drew me toward the main mass. "King," Ward's voice crackled in my ear. "You are off the deck. You need to move." "Working on it," I grunted. Breath came harder now. Each inhale jostled the claws. The limb pulled me toward a section of the apex's side where the surface parted. Flesh slid aside along a vertical seam, revealing a cavity inside. Soft tissue glistened, lined with structures that looked like a cross between ribs and hooks. The cavity pulsed once, as if in anticipation. It wanted to add me. The arm tissue I carried sang in my nerves. I had a sudden visceral sense of being recognized, of the creature's body treating me as a missing piece returning to its source. That dizzy impression almost stole my focus. I forced my fingers to act, not think. As the limb drew me toward the open cavity, I jammed my free hand into the pouch, grabbed the charge, and thumbed its arming switch. I let go of the trigger grip. Somewhere inside, a circuit closed. The device began its short count. "Now," I gasped. "Ward, now." I drove the charge into the cavity. It slid between those rib-hook structures, vanishing up to my wrist. The tissue closed reflexively around it. Hooks dug into the housing, anchoring it. The apex hissed, a low, shuddering vibration that ran through the limb still holding me. The limb jerked, pulling me deeper, trying to force me into that space, along with the device. I grabbed at the bar nearest me, wrapping my good arm around it. The claws in my chest stretched flesh, threatening to tear. The limb and I were now part of a tug of war, except this time the rope was me. Outside the cage, gunfire intensified. Something heavy slammed into the bars near my head. Ward's voice cut through the din. "Hold on," he barked. "You let go, I will kill you myself." The charge detonated. From this range, with my hand still halfway inside the cavity, the blast felt less like an explosion and more like being hit in the chest with a sledgehammer made of heat. Light flared inside the apex. The ribs holes around the device burst outward, flesh shredded. The shockwave ran through the limb holding me, up its length, into the main body. The limb spasmed, claws ripped free from my chest as it flailed. I lost my grip on the bar. For a heartbeat, I hung weightless in the cage, suspended in a storm of tissue and pressure and sound. Then another hand clamped around my harness. This one was human. Ward dragged me toward the edge of the cage, boots scraping the floor. Together we tumbled through the gap under the lowest bar and onto the chamber floor outside. Behind us, the apex convulsed. The internal blast had torn a hole through its middle. Segments collapsed inward toward the wound, then buckled outward as pressure equalized. Limbs flailed in all directions. Some slammed into the bars, bending them. Others sagged. "Charges," Ward commanded. "All ice collapse charges, fire." Kellen did not hesitate. He hit the sequence. The blocks in the ceiling directly above the gate blew. The sound was deeper than anything else that day. It came not just from the explosives themselves, but from the ice above fracturing. Cracks traced out in jagged lines racing across the ceiling. Plates of ice as thick as vehicles broke free. Chunks fell. The first impacts were stunning. Entire slabs of frozen mass slammed into the apex and the cage, driving both into the floor. Bars shattered. The cage's frame twisted. The apex's body compressed, then burst in places, fluids and fragments spraying out. "Move!" Ward snarled, hauling me toward the nearest side corridor. We stumbled, half running, half dragged. Men around us did the same, some on their feet, some crawling, some carried. A handful did not move at all, already buried under smaller falls. Another section of ceiling gave way behind us. The ring itself took a direct hit from a falling block. The stone and ice structure groaned, then broke. For a moment, the gate surface flared, wild and uncontrolled. Shapes flickered along it. Forest, sky, darkness, something else. Then it winked out. The mass of ice finished the job, slamming down into the space where the gate had been, crushing the base of the ring, burying what was left. By the time we threw ourselves into the side corridor and the emergency doors sealed behind us, the chamber was no longer a room. It was a tomb. After impacts like that, time goes strange. It stretches and compresses in uneven chunks. I remember lying on a cold floor, armor digging into my back, someone cutting it away from my chest. I remember a pressure band around my ribs, a mask pressed over my face, voices arguing above me about blood pressure and internal bleeding. I remember glimpses of Ward in the med wing, his arm in a sling, face bruised, leaning over my bunk. He said something I could not make out over the hiss of oxygen. It might have been a joke. It might have been an apology. I remember Bryce on a stretcher of his own, leg elevated, staring at the ceiling with eyes that looked older than they had in the ops room. From those fragments forward, most of the evacuation compressed into one simple image, the base rising around me as they moved us up from the compromised levels, ice overhead groaning in a way that made everyone walk faster. They got us out. The new facility smelled like disinfectant and old plastic. At least once a day I reminded myself it was better than burning meat. They put me in a room 3 doors down from the isolation ward. It had a bed, a chair, a sink, a toilet, and a window that did not open. Outside the window was another room, empty except for a camera and a door that led to the corridor. I had to pass through that empty room every time I wanted to see anyone. Weeks had passed since Corda, maybe months. It was hard to tell when your days all looked the same. The calendar on the wall stayed blank by design. They ran tests, blood draws, scans, exercise tolerance. They hooked sensors to my skin and made me walk on a treadmill while they watched heart rate and oxygen levels. They took tissue samples from around the scars on my chest and arm, comparing them to the earlier strand. The verdict was always the same. The foreign tissue is still there, the doctor told me once, holding up a scan that looked like a storm map. It has grown, but only along existing structures. It follows your muscles like ivy on a trellis. It does not invade organs, does not create new mass on its own. So I am not sprouting extra limbs in my sleep. He smiled thinly. If you were, trust me, we would not be having this conversation without a lot more glass between us. What does it do? We do not know yet, he admitted. It reinforces in some places. You have slightly higher strength in that arm than we would expect based on your build. But we do not see systemic changes. I flexed my right hand. The scars across my chest tugged. The forearm felt solid, not artificially strong, just stubborn, like it refused to fatigue as quickly as the other. Could it ever wake up? I pressed. That assumes it is sleeping, he answered. We think it responds to load. It might reinforce under stress. If it has any other behaviors, we have not triggered them yet. Yet, I echoed. He heard the tone. We are watching closely. You will not be left alone with this. I did not say what I thought then, that I was already alone with it in every way that mattered. Visitors came. Most were officers and scientists, men in uniforms and lab coats who looked at me like a sample that could speak. They asked about how the apex moved, how it responded to fire, to explosives, to confinement. They wanted my impressions of its behavior, my read on whether it would find another way to us if it could. Only one visitor came more than once. Ward showed up the first time 2 weeks after they weaned me off the heavier painkillers. He wore a suit instead of fatigues, which looked wrong on him, like someone had wrapped a statue in office wear. He dropped into the chair opposite my bed, ignored the camera in the observation room, and stretched his legs out until his boots almost touched mine. How is the view? He asked, glancing at the blank wall. Color palette could use work, but the neighbors are quiet. He snorted. You are the neighbor everyone else worries about. We let that hang a moment. How bad did they hit you? Claws tore muscle in the chest. Charge blast bruised everything else. A few ribs cracked, but they have mostly knit. The lab is more excited about the foreign tissue than the scars. They should be grateful you did not die and add another face to that thing, he grunted. I looked at my arm. The skin over the embedded strand looked normal. If you did not know where to look, you would miss the slight difference in texture along one line. They are not scared of me. They are scared of what they can do with me. Helix is still alive then, he asked. Helix never dies. It just moves offices. He shifted in his chair. Official report calls Corda a containment success with unacceptable collateral. Council is arguing whether to rebuild there or seal the site and pretend it never existed. What is your recommendation? I asked. Drop a mountain on it and post a guard on the paperwork. But no one has asked. He studied my face. You thinking of volunteering for any of their follow-on projects? I gave him a look. Thought not, he said. We sat in a comfortable silence for a few breaths, the kind that comes when two men have survived the same bad thing and do not need to name it again. You know they cannot let me walk, I finally said. I know. You are a potential bridge, whether you want to be or not. They cannot risk you waking up one day with a craving for sub-zero forests. I flexed my right hand again, watching tendons jump under the skin. The movement felt clean, precise. Part of me is still down there, I murmured. In that chamber under all that ice. Part of it is in you, he countered. Difference is, you chose what to do with your part. It did not. I chose to give it a piece of me so I could blow a hole in it, I reminded him. If that is not metaphor, I do not know what is. He grinned, brief and small. You are alive. That is what counts. For now, I said. You seen Bryce? Ward's expression shifted. He made it. Leg is a mess, but he will keep it. He is in hearings half the week. Some people think he should have trusted his own plan more. Some think he should have shut it down earlier. Almost nobody knows how close we came to losing that whole sector. He gave the order in the end, I said. He did, Ward agreed. You gave him the choice. That is the part no one writes in the reports. He pushed to his feet. I will keep leaning on them to treat you like a person and not a possession. Might take a while. Men in suits do not like being reminded that some threats cannot be bottled. You missed your calling, I told him. You would have made a great therapist. He huffed. Only for a very narrow client base. At the door, he paused. You did good, Jordan, he said quietly, without looking back. Do not let them convince you otherwise. He left. At night, I lay on my back and watched small movements under my skin. The foreign tissue did not writhe. It was subtler than that. When I flexed, muscles in my right arm pulled a little more in sync, as if something had improved their timing. When I lifted a weight, the strain distributed differently. The doctors called it reinforcement, as if I were a building that had been retrofitted. Sometimes when I closed my eyes and remembered the gateway chamber, I felt a faint ache behind my ribs, echo of the blast and the fall and the thing we buried. Once, during a debrief, a general with too many ribbons asked whether I thought anything could still be alive under that ice. I considered lying. No, I answered. No structure like that survives that kind of collapse. What about small components? He pressed. Fragments. Fragments are part of the environment now, I said. Any piece of it that still twitches is trapped under tons of rock and ice. It will never see open air again. Not unless someone went down there and dug. I thought of the kits and drills we had used to open the first shaft, of the way one bored hole had changed everything, of how easy it would be for a group with enough motivation to go back. That night, I went to the tiny bathroom off my room, closed the door, and looked at myself in the mirror. Scars mapped my chest, pale lines where claws had gone in and out, a starburst over the sternum where blast force had bruised bone. My right arm looked normal until I flexed. Then a single line of muscle stood out more sharply than the others, running from wrist almost to elbow, like a cable laid under the skin. I clenched my fist. The muscles in that arm tightened and released in one smooth motion. No tremor, no hesitation. There was a moment, just as they peaked, when the extra line seemed to pull a fraction ahead of the rest, as if it had anticipated the move. I opened my hand. Not today, I murmured. Whether I was talking to my own body or to the memory of the apex, I was not sure. They offered to move me eventually, not out into the world, that was not on the table, but into a different kind of role. Advisory position, Bryce told me on one of his visits. He walked with a cane now, legs stiff. You stay here or at another secured site. You consult on any future contact points. You help us recognize warning signs before they turn into another corda. And if I say no, I asked, You stay here anyway, he answered, but you do it as a patient instead of staff. He did not say prisoner. You going to keep looking for more gates? I asked. He met my eyes. We are not the only ones with drills and bedrock. Pretending otherwise would be stupid. I thought of the apex, drawn to the gate, reshaping itself around everything it found. I thought of men in rooms much like this, holding scans much like mine, asking themselves what they could build. I will consult, I said, on one condition. He raised an eyebrow. You listen when I tell you something needs to be burned instead of bottled. You remember how close we came to losing control, and you do not treat that as a price worth paying every time. I will listen, he said finally. I cannot promise I will always agree. He left me a stack of files after that. Early warning indicators, seismic anomalies, reports of strange finds in deep mines. I read them, arm aching in the same way it had in the cage, and circled the ones that felt like the start of another story beneath the ice. Some nights, when the corridor outside my room is quiet and the camera light in the observation room blinks, I do a small, stupid thing. I sit on the edge of the bed, hold my right arm out in front of me, and stare at my hand. Then I flex. Tendons move in clear lines. The reinforced band under the skin tightens, stands out, then eases. It looks almost normal, almost. I imagine a line running from that strand back down through stone and ice to a crushed body in a buried chamber. A link between what we were and what tried to eat us, and become something new. I do not know if that image is accurate. It does not matter. What matters is that I am here, in a room where the door opens inward, with scars that remind me what happens when you treat evolution as a toy. What matters is that when the next gate opens, because it will, somewhere, sometime, someone on this side will remember that you cannot bargain with a world where everything gets better at killing every time it eats. Until then, I am content to be what I have become. A warning, written in muscle and scar, waiting for the day someone listens.